My friends, today we're diving into one of the most inspiring stories of our time, the life, the faith, and the canonization of Saint Carlo Acutis. I invite you to stay with me until the very end of this video, because this is more than just a story about a young man. It's a story about how holiness can be lived in our modern age, how faith can transform ordinary life, and how God can use anyone, even a teenager with a computer, to change the world. Carlo Acutis is often called the patron saint of the internet. He's been given titles like God's influencer, the cyber apostle, and the Millennial Saint. But behind these titles is a real person, a boy born in 1991 in London to Italian parents, who grew up in Milan, who loved computers, video games, and pizza, but who also had an unshakable love for God that guided everything he did. He wasn't famous in his short life, nor was he powerful in worldly terms. But what set Carlo apart was how he lived ordinary days with extraordinary love, and that is precisely why the Catholic Church recognized him as a saint. But what exactly does that mean? Why was Carlo canonized? What led the Church to declare this young man, who died at just 15 years old in 2006, as a model of holiness for the entire world? Let's walk through this step by step, and by the end of this video, you'll see that Carlo's canonization wasn't just about miracles or devotion. It was about a life that pointed directly to Christ, a life lived with such clarity that it continues to inspire millions even now. Carlo was born on May 3, 1991. From his earliest years, those close to him noticed something different. As a toddler, he would look toward churches during walks and insist on going inside to greet Jesus. His mother, Antonia, later admitted that before Carlo, she had only gone to Mass for weddings or baptisms. In fact, she wasn't deeply practicing her faith at the time, and yet, through her son's deep devotion, she herself was drawn back to Christ. By the age of 7, Carlo had convinced his parents to let him receive his first communion early, a privilege usually reserved for older children. From that moment on, he made daily Mass a non-negotiable part of his life. He would say, "To always be united with Jesus, this is my life's plan." He also had a love for the Eucharist that was beyond his years. He called the Eucharist my highway to heaven. He believed the more we received Christ, the more we would become like him. This conviction became the anchor of his short life. Now, don't think Carlo was only about church and prayer. He was also a regular teenager in many ways. He loved soccer. He enjoyed video games. He had a great sense of humor and made friends easily. But here's the difference. Everything he did was rooted in love for God and others. He was the kind of teenager who stood up for bullied classmates, who shared meals with homeless people he met, who used his pocket money to help the poor. And perhaps most famously, he used his computer skills, which were impressive even as a child, to create an online exhibit of Eucharistic miracles from around the world. This was before social media exploded, before influencers were even a concept. Carlo became a digital missionary, using the internet not for fame or entertainment, but for evangelization. He wanted to show the world that the Eucharist is truly Jesus present with us. At age 15, Carlo's life took a dramatic turn. He was diagnosed with acute promyelocytic leukemia, a rare and aggressive form of cancer. He accepted his illness with courage, offering his sufferings for the Church and for the Pope. He never complained, and those around him were amazed at his serenity. Shortly before his death, he said, "I am happy to die because I have lived my life without wasting even a minute on things that do not please God." He passed away on October 12, 2006. His funeral was filled with people whose lives he had touched, from the poor he had fed to classmates who had been inspired by his kindness. Carlo was buried in Assisi, the city of St. Francis, because of his love for that saint. So how does someone like Carlo move from being a faithful teenager to being declared a saint? The process is rigorous and has several steps. Servant of God, in 2013. The Diocese of Milan opened his cause for canonization. At this stage, the Church investigates his life, virtues, and reputation for holiness. Venerable, in 2018, Pope Francis recognized Carlo's heroic virtues, declaring him venerable. This means the Church affirmed that he lived a life of exemplary holiness. Blessed, to be beatified, one miracle attributed to his intercession was required. In 2013, a boy in Brazil suffering from a rare pancreatic disorder was healed after his family prayed for Carlo's intercession. The healing was verified as miraculous, and Carlo was beatified on October 10, 2020, in Assisi. Saint, for canonization, a second miracle is needed. In 2022, another miracle, the healing of a young girl in Florence with a severe brain condition, was investigated and confirmed. With this second miracle, the way was cleared for his canonization. Pope Francis approved the canonization of Carlo Acutis, making him the first millennial saint. Why was he canonized? Now we come to the heart of the question. Why Carlo? Why was he canonized? 1. His heroic virtue. Carlo lived the virtues, faith, hope, charity, to a heroic degree. He didn't just believe in God, he made God the center of his every action. He didn't just hope vaguely, he trusted completely in God's providence, even in illness. He didn't just love casually, he loved sacrificially, going out of his way to care for the poor, the lonely, the bullied. 2. His Eucharistic devotion. Carlo's love for the Eucharist is central to his sainthood. He once said, "The Eucharist is the highway to heaven." His life revolved around daily Mass, Eucharistic adoration, and helping others understand this mystery. His online exhibit of Eucharistic miracles has been viewed by millions worldwide. 3. His use of technology for evangelization. The Church recognized something groundbreaking in Carlo. He used modern tools, computers and the internet, to spread timeless truths. In a world where technology often leads to distraction or sin, Carlo showed that the internet can be a tool for holiness. 4. His holiness in ordinary life. Carlo didn't do extraordinary things like founding religious orders or writing theological masterpieces. Instead, he lived ordinary life with extraordinary holiness. He studied, played, prayed, helped others, and loved God fully. This makes him relatable and accessible to millions, especially the youth. 5. Miracles through his intercession. Finally, his canonization is confirmed by miracles, healings that defied medical explanation, showing that God continues to work through Carlo even after his death. Why does Carlo matter for us today? Because he shows that holiness is not reserved for priests, nuns, or people living centuries ago. Holiness is possible right here, right now, in the 21st century. He reminds us that sanctity doesn't require withdrawing from the world. You don't need to be famous or powerful. You can love God with all your heart while coding on a computer, while scrolling through a phone, while living as a student. His story inspires young people especially because he lived in the same digital culture they live in. But instead of letting it consume him, he mastered it and redirected it toward God. Carlo shows us that sanctity isn't about doing less of life, but about doing all of life with God at the center. Pope Francis, in his exhortation Christus Vivit, highlighted Carlo as a model for young people. The Pope said, "He did not fall into the trap. He saw that many young people, though they appeared different, were the same as everyone else, chasing after happiness. He was aware that happiness is Jesus. This acknowledgement by the Pope affirms that Carlo's life is not just a private devotion, but a gift for the whole Church. As we reflect on his canonization, here are some takeaways for our own lives. Daily faithfulness. Carlo reminds us that holiness is built on daily choices: prayer, Mass, acts of kindness. Eucharistic centrality. He shows us that the Eucharist is not just a ritual, but the living presence of Christ. Technology with purpose. Carlo challenges us to ask, how are we using our phones, our computers, our social media? Are we using them to glorify God or just to waste time? Living with joy. Even in suffering, Carlo radiated joy because he knew his life belonged to God. Carlo shows us the path of holiness in the digital age. His canonization is the Church's way of saying, look here. This is what holiness looks like today. Follow his example, and you too can be a saint. So why was Saint Carlo Acutis canonized? Because his life bore witness to heroic virtue, to deep love for the Eucharist, to using modern tools for eternal purposes, and to inspiring countless people to draw closer to God. Because miracles confirmed his intercession, and because he shows us in the clearest way possible that holiness is attainable in every generation, even ours. As we close this reflection, I want to remind you of Carlo's own words. All people are born as originals, but many die as photocopies. He chose to live as the original God created him to be. And now, as Saint Carlo Acutis, he continues to call us to do the same. Stay with this thought, let it inspire you, and never forget, holiness is possible for you too. Thank you for staying until the end of this video. May the life and intercession of Saint Carlo Acutis inspire you to live every day as a step closer to heaven.